Okay, so we're going to do a quick live. Okay, so we're going to do a quick live. And it's going to be interesting because it's going to be about Maya Angelou. She was the poet laureate for Clinton's inauguration. And Andromeda Flame is going to join me because there's some things that many of you don't know about Maya Angelou. You know her as a poet laureate. I think she was a Pulitzer Prize winning author, I believe. But what you don't know is she was a former prostitute and a madam. Why is that important to understand? Because to understand that means that it gives people who are coming up through the ranks of doing various things in their lives, they can pivot and pivot and pivot and pivot and pivot, and you can make it. There's no experience that is worth being ashamed about. None. None. There isn't one. The only one, in my opinion, is harming children and animals and women. Aside from that, and you know what I mean by harming. You know exactly what I mean by harming. But everything else, Robin Hood shit, madam, prostitute, pole dancer, it doesn't matter. It really, I don't care if you're selling photos of pics of your feet, of your woo-ha, sending your socks, or your undies. You could still be the president of a country. You could be a multi-billionaire. You could actually help and save people. It has nothing to do with you, and it has nothing to do with who you are. And the fact that Maya Angelou, this is one of the things that used to piss me off with her. I'm going to be honest. I read her book. For who I'm waiting for Andromeda Flame to actually join me right now. So we're waiting. But this is probably the most important thing. This is a picture of her at Clinton's inauguration. The Pulse of a Morning was the poem that she wrote for the inauguration. Most of you don't know she was a madam in San Francisco. Some people say San Diego. Why do I know this? Well, because my father told me, and so did my husband's mother tell me. We knew the Tenderloin and the red light districts. It is a particular area next to a very famous bookstore called the City Lights bookstore, right there in San Francisco. It's right next to the Italian sector of North Beach. In other words, you could see all the red lights, the dancers, the weirdy seedy hotels, and I'm talking about seedy, okay? to right next to it was, you could get a cannoli, an espresso, a tiramisu, and then you could go to Chinatown right there. You could literally walk a pace, like literally 2 steps in, and get Peking duck, chow mein, whatever. Fascinating city, San Francisco. I mean, fascinating. And she was walking the streets and then eventually became a madam. She was not a madam at the beginning. And what's interesting to me about Oprah Winfrey, knowing that, is where are you, my love? Okay, let me get you up here because I really want you. So let me add you as a guest. What's important for that? So Andromeda, thank you for being here. I know you're busy. You've been very busy. I appreciate it. Why don't you tell our friends why this is so important, and why Oprah Winfrey never bringing that up, even though this was published. You can look it up. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. It's on Google. And I've known for it before there was a Google that ever existed. I knew about it through, like I said, my family's. This was a known story. Why is this important for people to know this?
It's important on a number of levels. Firstly, this was a wildly successful poet, and rightly so. I mean, one really wonderful writer who, as you said, spoke at Clinton's inauguration. But the point here is that those beginnings are not something that should ever be ignored. Those beginnings, those experiences
Mhm.
shaped her into a writer, and for either her to reject it or for someone like Oprah Winfrey, I'll come back to Oprah Winfrey, but
Yeah.
for these people to reject or to gloss over that history almost creates a mythical status where these people suddenly appear like unicorns
Right.
who are who are ready made. They've had no hardship, no abuse, nothing that they're necessarily and often wrongly ashamed of.
That's
That they
right.
somehow arrived at this point because of their virtue.
Right.
We're all humans. We all have shadows. We all have things that in our past that perhaps we would have done differently. But that
Right.
doesn't mean that those experiences are something we should be ashamed of or shy away from or ignore as part of the fabric of who we are today. And particularly with artists, all artists, writers, playwrights, painters, sculptors, what makes them good artists is the ability to see humanity and the ability to speak to our souls. And they simply cannot do that without some experience. It's also really important in a society as socially conservative as America
Yes.
that there are open conversations about sex work, that there are open conversations about the fact that this woman came from those beginnings
Yeah.
and became a madam and then became this world renowned writer.
Mhm.
Why is this something that we're ashamed of? I mean, Oprah Winfrey, um, acts like she walks on fucking water, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
um, like you said something to me earlier about her saying, well, money's not the root of happiness. Well, okay, give up a few of your billions and then we can talk, okay? Um, she's also point blank refused help where she can give it.
Mhm.
This is not someone who is in touch with her roots.
No, definitely isn't.
Now,
And then,
whether
yeah.
Maya Angelou wishes to, and she did speak a little bit about her time as a sex worker,
Yeah, she did.
but she didn't. She kind of almost, I suppose, stopped referring to it.
Yeah, she did. And that's a problem. Why do you think that's a problem? I mean, I know you talked about it, but why is it a problem? Why didn't Oprah, with all the, because she had multiple interviews, she actually went to Maya Angelou's house in the South. Um, there was a reason why I stopped watching Oprah, like, I don't know, before my son was born. But she never brought it up. That's a big deal. And lying by omission is still lying. Because you see, here, I'm gonna put it to you this way. Because I'm not talking to you, Sarah. I mean, Andromeda. You know that you and I are on the same page. But I'm
Yeah.
talking to you out there, whoever you are. You realize that there are girls right now, and it's been going on for a while. This is not new shit, okay? Who are doing what they need to do, and men, young men, doing what they need to do to pay the bills. Because it's either that or ending up in the streets. It's either that or ending up at mommy and daddy's house. And not every person has a mommy and daddy, by the way. Many of them are thrown out into the streets with a garbage can with their, garbage bag with their belongings as orphans who have turned 18 or whatever. And so my point is that many of them are going to do, especially if they've got good looks or whatever, they're going to take that route. There is no other choice. Immediately, you need bread and butter on your table and you need a roof over your head. But what they need to understand is it's a pit stop of evolution. It doesn't define you as a human being. It doesn't denigrate you. Is it the best situation? No, it isn't the best situation for a human being. But if a human being has to do that to bring themselves to a level, I knew so many girls who did that on the side. This was before OnlyFans. They were doing that on the sides to pay for college. Once they got their master's degree, they never looked back. They never went back to that work. But what we have to do as a society, especially in America, and stop the bullshit. Like, we need to be honest about where we're at with this, not to incite people to do it, but to give compassion to people and to let them off the hook. That's really it.
I, I think one of the biggest issues for me is this sanitization of the concept of virtue, right? And this idea that one becomes rich and successful and acclaimed through one's virtue, almost as if virtue were assigned by a conservative society's values.
Right.
And I think it's really important that we challenge that concept, that we don't simply look at virtue in terms of a virginal image of femininity, but we look at virtues as wisdom and experience and a voice. So it's this full concept of what virtue is, and virtue equals compliant and quiet, and that word that I hate, demure. Right. So that's virtuous, and virtuous equals successful. You will become successful if you're virtuous, which is why all of these people try to, bleach their past.
Yeah, exactly.
Sanitize their past, sanitize themselves. There's a whole industry for re-virginization. There's a whole culture now of this so-called traditional values of the virgin bride. Why is that considered more virtuous than a woman who has pulled herself up, who has learned, who has got educated, who has a voice, who has wisdom, empathy, and true femininity? We must reclaim the concept of feminine virtue.
I think that's why the root chakra has been so easily manipulated by the 1%. Because as long as people carry shame of being abused as children, which they do, two, having to do things to make make ends meet. I do have, and I don't know what kind of relationships you women have with your women friends. Maybe it's a don't ask, don't tell kind of connection. But along the way, from the age of 20 all the way to now, actually, no, I should say from the age of 17 all the way to now, I've come across a lot of women, young, very young, in fact, under the age, okay, who had to do what they needed to do to survive. Or they did it just because they couldn't make the rent. And I'm not saying do it. I'm saying if you have, it doesn't define you. What it does is it defines a society that gives people $23 on their food card because they're making $1,200 a month and rent is $2,000. It defines that reality. In other words, people are being pushed to do shit that they shouldn't have to do, right? Because our system currently does not give appropriate welfare, food, and so forth. And I've said it before. I had a friend who was homeless, not here or there, and was given, what was it, $48, and the food welfare people, well, while you're homeless, you don't have to pay rent, so you're getting Social Security. That's going on. So for young people, right, who have another option, they have a commodity, which is themselves, they do that. And we have seen that throughout the centuries. It's a reality that is scary. Jane Austen never talks about it in her books, but the inference of it is in the dark shadows of the reality of what happened to a woman unless she got married, unless she had male protectors, a father, a brother, an uncle, okay? If she didn't have that, and you've all read Les Miserables, the book The Miserables, Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, what happens to Colette? What happens to her? And until we have a kind, generous, this is why Victor Hugo wrote those books, to show us, in a way, he was a fucking feminist, come to think of it. But we have to understand that until our society becomes kind and generous and fair, some people honestly mentally can't work. Period. They don't have it in them. They really actually don't. Some of them are on the spectrum. Some of them are melancholy. They just can't. Their nervous system can't handle it. And I don't have a problem paying, out of my taxes or out of the taxes we pay, toll, lotto, supposedly lotto, all of these things that we pay, to pay people to figure out how to heal themselves so that they don't have to do these kinds of things. It would probably cut down on a lot of addiction, to be honest. I mean, it is what it is. How many people have I seen at the garage on a break doing, something to soften the edges because they can't handle it. And they have to literally lobotomize themselves in some way. But going back to Maya Angelou, the fact that she was a madam, and that's putting it kindly, if you guys had heard that on Oprah Winfrey, once she did the inauguration of Clinton with the Pulse of the Morning, it might have given a lot of people hope who were in their 40s, who had done things they were ashamed of or came out of jail. It might have done a massive pivot on a complete generation in our society. And that kind of lying by omission is fucking lying. And Oprah knew about it and never once did a special on that to have a massive American dialogue with the American public. She had everyone reading books, fictional shit, a couple good nonfictions like Michael Singer, but never that dialogue about those kinds of choices left to women again and again and again. Anyway, anything else to wrap it up? I know you're busy, and yeah, go ahead.
Well, as you were speaking there, sorry, excuse me. As you were speaking there, I was thinking, well, how can a society that is so uncivilized, a society that doesn't, that it's the wealthiest country on earth, that can't support homeless people, that has no universal health care,
Yeah.
that doesn't support unemployed people, how can a society like that be so socially conservative that people doing quote unquote uncivilized things are so ashamed or are made to feel so ashamed of it that they can't mention it when they actually become successful? Opening up the conversation about why people do sex work, why addiction occurs, what is homelessness, what does it mean? This opens up a wider conversation about what a society should look like, what a functioning society should look like, where all are supported, where people who can't work due to health issues or mental health issues
Yeah.
or other issues, where they are supported, where they are made to feel like valid functioning members of society.
Yeah.
Look at Finland, and I believe Norway have a universal basic income.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And you guys are going to freak out over that? Oh my God, it's socialism. Well,
Yeah.
unless you're a multi-millionaire sitting on about the fuck you money call 100 million or above, you better start embracing socialism because they are happier than we are. They have a better quality of life. If they have cancer, they don't have to worry. They're going to be handled. It's going to be handled. You're not going to see your FICO score fucking collapse into the abysmal world of 400 and below because you have cancer and you can't work, or you're expected to work after your biopsy because you've got the big C in your brain or in your body or in your colon somewhere in your. Anyway, the point is there's a cruelty that I know they're trying to, they're trying to do a 180, I know that right now many of you are freaking out about what, and believe me, I don't even know why I should say this, but whatever you believe in the current administration, the shit is being turned. And if you think that Kamala was going to fucking make changes, if you think she was going to stop the watermelon babies from being annihilated, if you think that after World War II, women didn't have hit the streets to do what in fact they did it during World War II. There are very there. I'm not even going to bring up her name. She's a very famous actress, very beautiful. I'll tell you later. Andromeda,
Yeah.
who was giving herself up to GI soldiers for ham, for cigarettes, for chocolate, for food, for any type of food. Okay? This was big. This was happening. And after the war, in World War II, a lot of women had nothing else because all the men had been annihilated and they had to hit the streets. That was big in Paris. Big. It wasn't just Pigalle. It was a very famous street called Rue Saint-Denis. And depending on how young or beautiful, you could go up a block, you could go the entire Rue Saint-Denis, and they got older and uglier. I'm not being funny. Based on the quartier where they were. And that started after World War II. Because all the men had been annihilated. Many of them were in the resistance. And they didn't make it, for example. So there were no men. And there was no way to make any money except that way. And the tourism started coming in, and there were clients. And people are ashamed to talk about it. And I think once we heal the root chakra of shame, we can, as a people, heal and go into massive ascension. But the root chakra is always what we've avoided throughout the centuries. And it's the root chakra we have to heal with focused ferocity, compassion, forgiveness, and shamelessness. We need to be unashamed and realize we've all done it in some incarnation at some point, done what we needed to do to survive. What's your last words, my love?
Well, I think that there are examples throughout history, in this incarnation, in previous incarnations, where we have had to do things that maybe don't sit well with us in order to survive. And it's not just sex work, it's other activities. This doesn't mean that we lack virtue or wisdom, or that what we have done we should be ashamed of. Obviously, there are examples of things which people have done for which they could be incarcerated. I totally understand why perhaps they would be reluctant to talk about that. But people who have done things for which they can no longer be prosecuted, who are in a position of influence, who are in a position of power, have a responsibility to talk about it. Unless, and the caveat would be, unless there's significant trauma associated with those events.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll upload this on YouTube. Thank you. Sending much love all to your journey. Be unashamed. Just heal it. Namaste.